I'm Margette Upshur, and I'm the Director of Economic Development and Tourism for the City of Lynchburg, and thank you all for being here. Many of you know something probably about the enterprise zones. Lynchburg has 2 enterprise zones. They're geographically specific, and they have 2 components. They're a state grant, and so we are the administrators of the zones that are located in Lynchburg. So the power that we would have here on the ground is within the confines of the rules that they have. We can petition the state sometimes to move the boundaries, but they have to give us final approval. The General Assembly appropriates the money for these programs every year. They're calendar year programs, and there's a job creation piece and a real property improvement piece. And also, these programs are good every 5 years. So if you get a grant, then 5 years from now, if you didn't get the, if you got the total or the cap of the grant, you can come back. So this is a very valuable tool for us here in the city. And we do these workshops, which we get the slides for the workshop comes down from the Department of Housing and Community Development, which is where these grants live, at the state. But we're very, very fortunate. Tonight we have a dynamic duo in Ryan McIntyre and his sidekick Corbin, who's amazing. They're both CPAs with Brown Edwards, and they have done a tremendous amount of enterprise zone work. And it really makes a difference who your accounting firm is, and especially if they have done work with DHCD or the Department of Housing and Community Development before, because a lot of interpretations that happen are from your CPA going to bat for you at, talking to DHCD. Because as you might imagine, it's Department of Housing and Community Development. They're not really construction people, right? They're up there, and these programs have been given to them, and they go through and check the boxes. And so what they do from the city's perspective, how they know that this work is done is that a Virginia certified CPA has to attest to the invoices, to the work that you've done. So they're putting their reputation on the line for all the invoices that you have. But they also is that there's got to be a building permit or a CO issued on the project if it is a real property improvement grant. So they know your work has been done up to code, because the city's going to give you that finalized permit or CO, and then that CPA attests to the invoices that come through there. So that's really what they use to make sure that these projects are, up to code, and there's not grant money going to people that, didn't build something that's not going to stay up, or, that they can't come back. And they actually can, if they had the staff, and they have done this before, Ryan knows, they come back and audit sometimes. Did you do what you said on the application? So we want to make this, as you might imagine, like I said, there's lots of slides in here. I give you the cliff notes on it with some humorous stories every now and then to go along with it. But I will tell you, from people in the room that I know have gone through the process before, sometimes when you come to our office and we talk about all the incentives, Dwayne can probably relate to this. We talk about all the incentives. Until you have an actual project, it's really hard to put all that into perspective. So what we're trying to do is take at the state level and at the local level and layer the incentives. Lynchburg, very, very old city, a lot of redevelopment. More so probably than new construction, even though this program addresses new construction as well. So what we're trying to do is make those any barriers that you would have to redevelop, like exorbitant costs to redevelop old buildings, or to repurpose something, or to expand, or to do all that, for you to have some help to be able to do that. So I'm going to go through this. And we will just tell you, first of all, this is Anna Benson. She's the Assistant Director of Economic Development and Tourism. And Jason Witt is in our office. He is the Economic Development Coordinator. And So they are invaluable members of the team. We're always available for you to talk to. I will tell you though that when we finish many times and the questions that are asked, the people that can answer them are sitting right there. Ryan and Corbin a lot of times can answer questions, and they have always been incredibly gracious to come to the meetings. And Ryan has served on many a panel. I mean, if I had to ask a question, and many times we ask the question perhaps of Ryan before we call the state, because if it's not the answer we want, there may be more deliberations. So we do that, you know, trying to figure out what's the best way, or how should this be said, because once again, it goes up to a group that's checking a box. And they, you know, and the way that you articulate that sometimes is to how it's categorized. So we have a very dynamic website. So we have, one of the things is that the enterprise zones are geographically specific. So I always tell people, if you have any question, always check the address and make sure that it is in, you know, make sure that it is in the zone. That's not as difficult as the new opportunity zones, because you really need to check the address because they're done by census tracts. So what we've tried to do, I can only have, gosh, I'm forgetting, 7% of the city's total acreage in a zone. Residential parcels cannot take advantage of this. I can only have per zone 2 non-contiguous areas. So I can't just pick it up and put it down anywhere. So our GIS department at the city is incredible, and they work with me all the time in figuring out how we can take like residential parcels out to gain back that acreage to enable us to have. So I've tried to put as much of any concentrated amount of commercial or industrial property in one of our 2 zones. So Ryan might know, but in 2015, there were 58 zones in the Commonwealth of Virginia. They have legislation that says by 2020, they are to have 30 zones. So these zones come up for renewal. They come up like every 20 years, it's 10 years, and then you can, you know, you can extend for another 10. So the downtown zone, that's what I'll call it, but it extends out if you know, if you look at it on the map. That's the second, it was the second enterprise zone in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It expires in 2024. The zone 46, so that means it was the 46th zone in the Commonwealth, was just re-upped in 2015. So I got another, you know, 20 years on that, which is fantastic because a lot of municipalities don't have any zones. And as they shrink down, that means that the money that the state appropriates for this program will go further because it's prorated. So every year when you submit, you're going to be in there with all the other zones and people that have applied, and then they put that money across the board. And they give the job creation, as you might imagine, all politicians love a job. That gets first priority to the money they have appropriated, and then it comes down to the real property improvement. So once again, you can go on our maps and look at, you can search by the address to see that it's in the zone, and you can also see the enterprise zone activity, like who else, I mean, you know, who else has applied for the zone. I just think it's very dynamic if people are looking at this community to be able to see that we have very, very active zones. That's another way we keep the zones, is because we do meetings like this and we try to let people know if they're in a zone. And also, if you're doing construction or rehabbing something of any significance and you're on the cusp of the zone, you need to call somebody like me. We have other programs in the office. So we have a revolving loan fund. It's up to $250,000 for a business, and you can the Business Development Center, which is out off of Mill Ridge, they help us administer that, but you can call Jason on that. We have probably about 5 loans probably outstanding right now, and that turned out really well. I'll just give a shout out that when the city, or the EDA, the Economic Development Authority, which is the city's incentive arm, when Riverviews was trying to get up and running, and you can imagine a lofts, now it seems like second nature, but back in the day, you look around at people in Lynchburg and we go, we're doing lofts. They were like, what? And then we're gonna have an artist, we're gonna have a co-op, an artist co-op. I can't even imagine having that conversation back then. But the city participated, the EDA participated in that to get that up and off the ground, to give some gap finance in there. They put a loan out for $1 million to an arts organization who paid us completely back. Bam, that's amazing. So we took that money and put it in the revolving loan fund, and now we lend it back out. We have a local redevelopment program that's for small, we looked at that for smaller projects, like for people, you have to do at least $100,000 worth of work to your building to have it qualify. And some people get right up against that, and they changed the rules on us. So it used to be $50,000 and they let you count all of it. Now it's 100 and they don't let you count the first 100. So it's 20% of anything after that. So that really kind of hems up a smaller project. So that's why we came up with the redevelopment program, and it's become so popular that we have no money left in it for this year. I mean, it used to be that people, you try to tell people about it. It's so easy to fill out. I think that I just need to make it really hard, right? Because the easier I make it, the more confusing and it seems to be. So anyway, that's a program. And then our real estate rehab program, even though it's had some modifications made to it in the last year or so, that's a kick butt program right there. If you're doing work to a building here that's 25 years old, you can call the city assessor's office. You need to do it on the front end, and they will freeze your assessment, and whatever you do to the building, you won't have to. If it's a commercial property, that assessment will be less the improvement amount for 10 years. And for residential, if it's 5 units and under, it's 10 years. If it's 5 units, if it's over 5 units, it's 7 years, right? They just changed it. But that's real money over a period of time in terms of that. So that's an excellent program as well. Co-Starters is our entrepreneurial curriculum. And that is, we do classes in that, and Ryan is an excellent teacher. He gets graded all the time as being one of the best teachers that they have in there. And he's a CPA, so think about what that takes to teach people that and still. No, I mean, but if you came in there and you just started rattling all that off and you weren't a geek or something, I mean, that's pretty good to get high marks when you're speaking about accounting, I think. But it's a great program. How many people have graduated from there, Anna?
60.
I mean, it's been full every time that we've put it out there. So this is a curriculum that came out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And back in the day, I'm sure it's changed by now, but they had about 40 communities all over the country that implemented this. And it's a much more kind of hands-on and peer-to-peer. Instead of people walking in where they scare you to death and say, you've got to have a balance sheet and you've got to have all that. Yes, you do at some point, but you've got to incubate that idea enough and feel confident enough about it and understand that. So it's a really great way for anybody that's testing an idea or just wants to see, well, what could happen and what might be involved in that, and you really make lasting relationships in there. And actually the first year that we did it, we had a pitch contest with grant money that we got from the Department of Housing and Community Development. And these folks that graduated and won that had to have a storefront within like 3 months, right? Like get up and run and have a storefront. And I'm very proud to say that there's at least 4 or 5 of them that still have storefronts today from that from that pitch contest. So it's pretty cool. Okay, so upcoming events, we have moved. The State of the City is normally done in February, sometimes, but it's going to be done on April the 29th, and it's actually at the Academy this year. So that's really stepping out of the box for us, isn't it? Word. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go over the program, and even though I have a dense Southern accent, I might go a little fast. But I'm gonna I'll hit the high points, and y'all please stop me anywhere if you have, if you have questions about this. And some of this, once again, all of this is available to you all. It's on the back. We were afraid that, I don't know what we'd have done without Alan. We are always afraid that this computer up here, there just seems to be, it's wicked.
All computers have.
Yeah, I know it, but this one up here, like I told them to be here at 3 today. Right? Like they might have had to catch the bus to get the person to come. There's just something about it. It just never,
I think Ryan's sabotaging you because he's afraid to get a score of 10 instead of a 9.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. So really, the idea behind, and the enterprise zones have been around what, 50 years maybe? I know in the city, yeah, it started as a tax credit and now it is a grant. So your applications are online, you fill them out, and ship them in. I think now they allow me, if you send, I have to sign off, and my signature verifies that you are in the zone. But now I think they allow somebody to send me their form filled out, and I can sign it and scan it back to them. They used to hunt me down on the day of that this needed to be postmarked, right? And they'd be standing at the door like all I do all day is just sit there, and go, God, I was just waiting for you, to get here. No. And so that makes it a lot easier. But that's what we do. Your CPA, a lot of people will, fill out all the paperwork and then have the CPAs, attest to it or go through it at the end, and then I sign off on it, and the parcel owner signs off on it. So that's another thing. If you own a parcel and you're leasing to somebody that you want this to be a benefit to them, you will have to assign that benefit to them. So the parcel owner kind of rules when it comes to the real property, improvement grant. But there's lots of ways to look at that. So I've explained to you that there's real property improvement under $5 million, cap is $100,000. Over $5 million, cap is $200,000 of what you can get for a project. So it's calendar year. So what I'll tell you is they don't care when you start, they care when you finish. So the year in which you get that certificate of occupancy or finalized permit is the calendar year in which you're going to apply for this. So if you finished work in 2018, calendar year 2018, you've got a CO or a finalized permit, your application will be due April 15th or 1st? April 1st. And then they go through it, and if you've made any mistakes, they're relatively forgiven, right, Ryan? They'll come back and say, there's a period of time that they will come back and allow you to correct it, and then normally you're notified and have a check by, July the 15th, something like that. So it is a grant. It is not a tax credit or any of that. So job creation is a different kettle of fish, and we'll get down to that we'll do the real estate rehab first. The real property improvement. So this is the riveting part that lets you see the legislation from the General Assembly that allows this to occur. This is good, isn't it, Ryan?
Yeah, familiar.
So there is a big list that we will probably get to in here of things that qualify and, and don't. And I am going to probably make Ryan and Corbin uncomfortable. In just saying that the way I look at this is if you could take it with you, I mean, if you can pull it off the wall, if you can take it with you or whatever, you probably can't count it. And you can't count design.
Right, soft costs.
Soft costs don't qualify it.
But they are important to track because if you're doing a joint enterprise zone historic credit application,
Right.
if you're using the cost for both, you want to keep track of your soft costs because those are applicable to the state.
So you can see that a lot of these redevelopment projects, you really need to get experts involved early on because they're state, federal tax credits. You need to know if it's worth it or not. But tracking all of this together can make a significant difference in what your construction costs end up being. So rehabilitation, expansion, or new construction. As I said, if you're doing any kind of expansion, meaning that it's part of an existing building or rehabilitation of a building, then your threshold is $100,000 and you don't count the 100. If you're building a new building, it's $500,000 and you can't count the 500. So it must be in the enterprise zone. We already talked about that. That's geographically specific areas within the city. It's got to be a commercial or industrial building. If it's mixed use, this is very important. At least 30% of the floor space needs to be, that commercial office or industrial use. And this is really where, as you're doing your plans, if you're doing any kind of mixed use, you need to get with somebody and figure, those parts of it out early on. Because there's been times when there was 30% of usable space, but nobody touched it in the renovation because
5%.
Yeah.
That's a really bad.
Yes, absolutely.
And they didn't know until they got done.
Yes, and you could have, so you don't want that to happen. You'd just rather not know in that case, right? And a facility, I believe that this rule was made in Lynchburg, Virginia, with the Craddock Terry Hotel. So they have those buildings that are connected by the awning at the hotel there. They got the conference center and the other part. And at one point they wanted them together and then they wanted them apart and And so DHCD made the rule after the fact that a facility is a group of buildings that really can't, they're involved in similar, the same kinds of work. Like you could say the restaurants probably could have operated, but that was, the conference center was part of the hotel. So
that building was all owned.
Yes, owned by the same person. And so, but if you have totally separate parcels, each parcel can qualify, for the enterprise zone. But if they have if one connects to the other or something like that, that's where this comes into play. So back in the day, trying to have some redevelopment opportunities, I put the whole plaza in there. Well, now the plaza is one facility. So unless it is a building that is on a separate parcel from there, like the ones in the back where Central Health put the health department and, back in the back there and where the movie theater is, that whole facility. So if somebody wanted to apply, the owner, Liberty, would have to let them, let that one person apply, and that would be it for for 5 years, because that's considered a facility. So one of the cool things is, then between, as we desperately tried to redevelop many things, we put the mall in there. Nobody has a mall in their enterprise zone. However, our mall, until recently, all the anchor stores owned their own parcels. So Belk, Penny's, Sears, Macy's, Value City, they all were separate parcels. And so should they have chosen which I was so hopeful of, that they would refurbish the outside of their place, they would have each been able to qualify for enterprise zone. So this is where you talk about tenants, property owners, but the property owner, if I'm not wrong, Ryan, the property owner rules. They're the ones that's got to grant, somebody else the ability.
They don't have to sign off on it.
Right, and have to, and like you said, sign off on it. So it's also things like multiple owners. You'd have to get everybody, and then, on tenants, it would probably be that depending on the building, if they had very different operations, it still would be considered one parcel with the ability to do like one $100,000, project.
Right. And developers, just to touch on that, because we ran into that a little bit with, like when some of these box stores, they actually have a developer build their building,
yeah,
and they sell them and that contract piece, so if there's a developer in the room, being really careful with those contracts and making sure that enterprise zone is addressed, because it's actually required under the rules, the enterprise zone addresses who claims the benefit when you're a developer. So you don't want to get to the end of the development and not have that in your agreement.
Right, and sometimes it's really hard for us if they're a developer that, swoops in somewhere and does whatever. They don't even believe you when you tell them there's such a thing as the enterprise zone and they could get credit for it. Ryan can attest to this. That he goes, you will be leaving $200,000 on the table. And they went, no way. And he went, yes way.
We had one that actually got the check and then called me and asked me if it was really legit and he could deposit it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all true. So here are the thresholds. Like I said, $100,000 for a rehab or an expansion. And if you drive around town in certain places, you may see a building that seems to have a very long walkway to the next building. That would probably be somebody that's in the enterprise zone trying to have their expansion be connected to the original building, so the threshold's only $100,000. A conveyor company comes to mind. And so one of the things that you want to be mindful of is over that 5-year period, let's say you apply, you've got a project, and due to proration, you only get a portion of it. You get $60,000 there. If you do another project within those 5 years that meets that threshold again, you can come back and apply for the rest of it. So those are normally, if you have these people as an accountant, they will call you and tell you that, right? And what we try to do is every year on December 31st, we pull all the finalized permits. And we try to contact everybody that we know on there to let them know that they could be eligible for the enterprise zone. But since all of y'all game the system and make your building permit a lot less than what you're actually going to spend because you don't want to pay us any money, the city, sometimes I have to guess at what you've spent. Because many times when I started looking, when we were working on something this week, the difference between what that building permit said and what you actually spent attested to on there was quite a significant difference. So shocking to me. Just quite a significant difference there. But you can count all of these things. So 9 times out of 10, you've spent a lot more money that can probably be calculated in there than what's on the building permit. That's all I'm saying is just keep all that there. So these are the things that you can't claim. And so it's 20% of the qualified real property investment over $100,000, or $500 if you've got. Here's an example of how it works. Oh boy, that's exciting. Okay, wow, sweet spot. So this just lets you know, like Ryan probably did this one too, but we had a company here that did a substantial expansion several years ago, and once you get past the sweet spot in terms of all of that, unless Ryan tells you something different, you don't putting all of that information in there is not. You don't need to. They probably capped their project off at $5 million instead of 16. Because they were going for this. They weren't going for state or federal tax credits or anything else. They were just doing this.
But if you're phasing a project, you want to make sure you get, because how Marcia had mentioned, you can go back in subsequent years and get more. So let's say you're doing a $2.5 million project, and at the same building or facility, you're doing another 3 the following year. You want to certify everything that you can, because you're going to end up crossing that about $1 million mark.
Yeah.
And unlocking that $700. So if you don't, like that first year, you only go to $1 million and say, I got enough to max out this year. The next year, you do that 3, you're only getting up to the 100 instead of what you would have been getting to 200. So
Yeah.
if you're doing a phased project, it's important to capture all.
And maybe some of you don't know you're going to be doing a phase project. Like you all of a sudden the home office granted you that money you've been begging for from here to eternity, and you get to pull off the rest of it. You're going to want to know, because if you cross that threshold, like you said, of over $5 million, that's another $100,000 there.
It's $5 million and one. It's $5 million and one.
Yeah, that's all. $5 million and one, and over a period of time, because you've reached the threshold again when you apply. So that, like I said, eligibility is calendar year that it was placed in service, final certificate of occupancy, building inspection, or third-party inspection. So what that means is that, like I said in the beginning, DHCD is looking for verification from the municipality to say that this was done to code. So there have been people, not lately, thank goodness, that bring in something that they spent $100,000 on that did not need a building permit. I have a really hard time asking my inspectors to go back and write a letter for somebody. I need you to come to me on the front end. I mean, you had a paint extravaganza, right? That and most of the time, if you didn't get a building permit, the stories that I've heard about why. This is a religious community, so, it can be anything. The rapture, and you just didn't know. That's all. That you need to let us know ahead of time, but there are municipalities that have enterprise zones that don't have building officials, or maybe only have one. They don't do all this type of work. And so you really do need a letter from them. And our guys are really, really good about addressing things. Like if you had multiple projects, but not just one big rehab project, of trying to, do that. I don't like to ask them, to get involved in that unless we're talking to them on the front end where they have plenty of time they don't feel like they're compromising their integrity. So this is, what is this saying? Applications are not done through CAMS.
Yeah, you just don't have to submit and get paid through the EFT system.
So you just submit the
We're
application.
going to change it.
Oh, that's right. That was the thing.
They tried to do that, and it was a disaster.
Okay, none of you all probably know what CAMS is, so just forget you ever saw that. Right? Because that is, Anna Benson could tell you, it's a very complicated system, right? So you just go to the enterprise zone application, you're going to do the work, and submit that, you get the proper signature, submit that form. Do you have to submit a hard copy now? After that, and it has to be postmarked by April 1st? Oh, I'm reading it. Word. Okay.
I would recommend not submitting anything till it's gone through whichever CPA you're using to certify it. Because we've had that issue before too, where people completed their own
No, it has to be a test.
our ability to
Help you.
help you becomes limited.
Yes. Okay, so it's organized in 7 parts. It really doesn't look that threatening when you get to it, does it? So this is how the property is listed under those categories. And so if it's a mixed-use building, you're going to have to show them that it's 30% commercial.
Signed off by an architect.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Okay. And this is where the coordination, if you're a tenant. But you're probably going to want to get that, all of that, like Ryan says, you're going to want to get that worked out on the front end. So I talked to a lot of people that are renting buildings, and either work it out with the landlord so that the credit for the work you're going to do or however it's going to be done is worked out in your lease or in your rent payments or whatever it is like that. Because many times if somebody is not used to doing this, then I can tell you you're in the enterprise zone and pull your name and send you a letter and send you an email. But if you're not used to any of this and you're just kind of out there as an outlaw doing, little development, you won't remember to go and sit down and get this and fill this out. So these are the most common errors. It's not a final permit. Or you were placed in service documentation, doesn't all coordinate. So it's done in different years. So they're going to want you to, figure that out and explain that to them. Application spans multiple addresses. People, it's a facility. You're going to really want to get that checked out. And I will just say, if you have a CPA that's ever done enterprise zone work before, they're going to prep you. They're going to take care of this on the front end. Some people have been dealing with I'm sure your CPA is fantastic. This is just a little different animal. And if you haven't done it before, that CPA hasn't done it before, they need to be mindful of some of these things. So the differences in address entered from one year to another, that's kind of blatant. And everybody, this facilities thing, I think, is difficult for people to, to wrap their head around. Because if you think about the plaza, yeah, it's retail, but there are other things. The doctors groups in there. There's all kind of things, but that's one parcel, one facility. Vague or conditional items listed, it needs to be pretty clear. And if your CPA signed off on it, they would probably catch that you don't have it described well. Do you all do that, or most of the time the people?
We do it turnkey.
Okay.
We complete all the forms and everything because we try to set them up so that it just goes right through.
Right.
We rarely have a question because general conditions will get you every time. Just some of those terms, overhead, those kind of things. They
Yes.
prefer to be broken down down to specific.
Yeah.
parts.
That sounds like something it'd be like about 11:45 at night, and you'd be going, yeah, it was just additional flooring work. That's okay, isn't it? Change order, right. Okay, so like I said, they can monitor these at random just to come and see that you've kept the documentation on it. So you have to keep the documentation for 3 years following the receipt of a grant. Okay. Where is What does that mean, Ryan?
I wasn't paying attention, sorry.
It's just, the years that I have been getting up here and talking about this, we have not had a lot of changes, and so I always want to be very specific. And most of the time, the changes are something that those of us mere mortals understand and do not have the word treasury or you know, something capital account connected to them.
So what it means is, under the rules have always been that the only way we could count it was properly charged as a fixed asset on your books of record. Well, about last, I guess 2017 tax season, the IRS issued what they call the tangible property regs, and it changed a lot of things that could be, that used to have to be capitalized, but now can be expensed, like roofing and flooring in a lot of cases. So what it's saying is if you're allowed to expense it just because it's under the new tangible property regs, it doesn't automatically exclude you from including it. So it's, what they don't want is, you know, repairs. But if you put on a new rubberized roof that wasn't changing the structural component, the bracing underneath is a good example, that rubberized roof now can be expensed under the TPR regs. And that's what they're saying is we'll still count that as part of the enterprise zone, even though you're expensing it.
That's just clear as mud, isn't it? Okay, do y'all have any questions about the real property improvement grant? Yes.
So we have, on the academy, we have new construction on the lobby. And then we have a rehab project with the actual theater itself.
Correct.
And they are technically, because of the historic tax credits, they are actually not touching, like technically, right, because they're not supposed, they are, but meeting the demands of the tax
There's
credits.
got to be some connective feature. Though.
They are.
To jump from one building to the next.
Right, and it is connected for the purposes of that. So
Right,
they're
I
kind
think
of-
you didn't want to have the expansion for the historic tax credit, you couldn't have the expansion of the footprint.
Right.
So but there is a doorway or something to go between the two.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah, so it
yeah.
would be, that would not be a new construction. That-
So
you
the
only have-
whole thing is considered, okay.
Yeah,
Which is really to your benefit, because it's a smaller threshold.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it would have been a facility anyway.
Right.
But you only have 100, you only lose your first 100 costs instead of your first 500. Now for the academy part of it.
Doesn't matter, because
Not
it's
that
such a
much
big
difference.
project.
Because you guys will hit the 5 million, get the whole 200.
Well, that was my question too, because either building would hit it, actually, so if you separated them. But if they're
Yeah.
together, then it doesn't.
Yeah, because that's under common ownership, common function,
Okay.
co-located. So
Okay.
it would meet the definition of a facility. But, you know, it's still 200, subject to proration, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, but consider it all one.
Mhm.
Yeah, under the list of qualified real property investments, you had a lot of different trades there. I didn't see anything on photovoltaics. And if solar photovoltaics are included in that list, is the cost before or after the tax credit, the 30% tax credit?
So I would have to actually ponder that because I have not worked on the solar credit included. Now, the solar credit would be irrespective of the grant. I do know that, just like the historic credit, the federal historic credit doesn't
So you could
reduce,
stack them.
Yeah.
wouldn't affect the value. Presumably, we would probably try to make the argument that the solar panels were an integral piece of the building.
They
would not
they
take
transfer
them
with the
off
property.
and move them.
No.
And they would not be machinery and equipment, and they would probably be funding the fueling the electrical system, just like an electrical substation. I mean, that's one of those things that probably what we would normally do is we would reach out to DCHD and write it in a manner such that making the case for it being part of the building. We did that on an electrical substation for one of the manufacturers and got it included. But the regs are very thin, the examples are very thin, so when we get to that, because I know that would be a significant cost, that's when you kind of reach out anonymously, and it's great to reach out to a CPA, because, you know, if they say no, you can change your approach.
Right, we always tell people just, you know, to go for it, right? And hopefully your CPA makes a good case, but, You know, it's much better, if you ask and then they tag it and whatever, then you can believe there'll be some kind of, they'll go, oh, no, you know, whereas if you send it, I mean, to me, if I'm standing there listening to it, I'm going, are you kidding me, we wouldn't count solar? I mean, somebody's building that into part of what they're doing?
Because we've done, I mean, we've been able to even do module walk-in freezers. So technically, they could be unbolted and taken away, but it's damage to the building because they're piped in. You know, the solar's going to be, you know,
The trade fixtures.
yeah, I mean, it would not be easily removed without damaging the building. And the building probably wouldn't function in its intended capacity without it, because you'd have to probably change the power.
And then too, if it was taxed as real property,
Mhm.
it might, you know, as part of the real property.
So if it's, yeah, if it's being taxed from.
Well, right now they're exempt from property tax.
Oh.
Mhm.
I would make one point, it's not really a question, but say your project is kind of finalizing at the end of the year and you get your CO in December, but you really haven't paid all the bills. Make sure that your invoices are paid within 60 days of your grant year, because if you don't, you know, a lot of people have that retention. And we ran into an issue last year where somebody was very close to the 5 million mark, but hadn't paid a $300,000 invoice, their last invoice within the 60-day time frame.
Wow.
So, and it has to actually be paid. It can't be a loan. It can't be, you know, a note, a promissory note or anything. It has to actually be paid.
Now, if you get by bank financing to pay for it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it can't remain unpaid or be on a loan agreement with the contractor.
Any other questions? Okey dokey. Job creation grants. It's really interesting because, like I said, the city has had enterprise zones for a very, very long time. And the Zone 46, which is out, of course, we stretch them out everywhere, but it was originally overlaid on Frito-Lay and where BWXT is now and Novatech and all that. And it was put on there as an incentive to bring Frito-Lay here. And they've never used the job creation grant. So the job creation grant is, you know, sometimes people think it's really, really complicated, but it really can be significant when you add over, you know, 4 people to your workforce. And it goes for 5 years. So you set a baseline number, they'll give you a look back year, and then all the people that you add within that 5 years, you can count them, you know, along the way. So you have that baseline number, and as long as you're over, you know, 4 people, your 5th person, you can count, and then everybody you add within that 5-year period over the baseline, you can count. I was thinking Jeff could probably count people. Okay, good job. All right, so they need to be, there are certain professions, certain NAICS codes, like they're really hard on restaurants and retail, because those, in their mind, those are much more transient types of jobs. They're looking for higher paying, you know, what they believe stable, which, what does that mean anymore? But anyway, nonprofits can take advantage, and that wasn't always the case. They can take advantage of the real property improvement grant, but they cannot take advantage of the job creation grant.
Yeah, they can do the real property, but not jobs.
Right. Oh, that's right, you can. Yeah. Oops. Oh, well. Okay, so base year, the base year is gonna, you're always gonna want the base year to be, you know, when you had the lowest number, if you can, of employees. Like if you're doing a major expansion or any of that, your look back year, they'll let you have the year you're in, get me right on this if Ryan or Corbin, or the year beyond that, meaning 1 year behind that.
So
Right.
the startup is kind of great.
Yeah, it's great.
Or somebody that relocates to town, your base year can be 0 employees.
Right.
Or, you know, so those are the ideal situations.
Yes. So it says 2 calendar years. So it's a 4 jobs is the threshold. They need to be net new to Virginia. So this might have been one of the reasons why Frito-Lay didn't take advantage of it. If they have multiple plants in the Commonwealth, they would have to have net new jobs of all those plants, right? So it couldn't just be that the Lynchburg plant added, 50 people, because if they had if they lost people, even through just people going to look for another job, it still wouldn't be net new to Virginia. So it's permanent, full-time. They have to earn at least 175% of federal minimum wage and have health benefits. And as I told you, personal service, which I guess would be nail salons and hair salons, right, Ryan Corbin?
Right.
Food and beverage and retail. You don't have to keep the person, but the job needs to, that job needs to stay in place filled with someone. And as you can see, from an HR perspective, it can be a little bit more complicated if somebody left in, midterm and all that. You have to be able to account. They have to work a minimum of 35 hours for at least 48 weeks and, have fringe. I mean, it is definitely a little bit more challenging, but I believe, HR departments, you all keep up with all of this all the time. So meeting the wage and health requirements. So one of the things they will let you do is, like, let's say you have a call center of some sort, and maybe you have X amount of employees that make a certain wage, but then you have a group that you've hired on and they're more, management or supervisors or that. They will let you apply for the folks that meet these requirements. And then the other people you wouldn't apply for, but you can do, you can take the ones that you have hired as long as they are over that 4 threshold and hire them. So this is what if they make 150% of the federal minimum wage in high unemployment areas. We are not a high unemployment area. But these are, I don't know why Danville keeps getting all that money if they are continually, they just snaked us on VDOT. Anyway, it just came out of the blue. We were all teed up. So they change these, it fluctuates, but they fund this first. So when they do the appropriation for enterprise zones at the state level and they're passing out the money, it goes to the job creation grants first.
No proration.
Yeah, no proration. You get the full thing. And you saw on there, it's different levels, 800 a job, 500 a job, depending on 175% of minimum wage is 500 a job, and 200% of minimum wage with benefits is 800. And that's for 5 years for those jobs staying in place. So a CPA attesting to this, you would have to have more than 100 employees in order for CPAs to have to attest. Otherwise, your folks can fill out the form. So they're determined on wage rates and the number of full months. So this is all of that, tracking exactly what meets the requirements that they had up there just now. How many weeks did they work? How many hours did they work? And do you get some partial credit for that employee? So this is just an example. You hired, in your base year, you had 10 and, yeah, go back. Okay. Does that make sense?
This is a lot more complicated than that.
It's definitely a lot more complicated, but
But it's more lucrative.
it's more lucrative, and when you walk through the application, itself, and with the way that a small business might, have a little problem, but that's another reason why you may want to have, whether you have to have a CPA attest to it or not, just to help you work through it. Or if you have a payroll provider, I don't know what people like Me either. Well, or that would even walk you through it. Like sometimes it's even hard to get, other than what they exactly do, getting any other reports for the state for incentive purposes is challenging.
You typically see larger businesses apply for this. Or, I mean, somewhere between probably, moving into town with 30 or more jobs.
Right.
Because you almost have to have an HR department and some professionals there to be able to extract the data properly.
Right, or to set it up to extract it on the front end to be able to calculate something like this. Okay, Jason, thank you. So you can apply for 5 years. And so just every year you just true up how many, did you add any new people in that year? And did you keep the people that you've reported that are over the 4, of whatever your baseline was there? And this is what the worksheet looks like. Do not skip columns and do not disrupt or change the formulas. So when you feel compelled to do that, step away.
That will get you a call from DCD,
Yeah.
no doubt.
Yeah, that's so, and Isaac Newton and Alexander Graham, that's so amazing. George Washington and Douglas Wilder. Word. Okay.
That's talking about, people with rate changes, you have 2 lines for them.
Yeah, because if they got if they had something in between there. So, yeah, I mean, it isn't, if you do any kind of HR work, this looks complicated, but you're keeping up with all this kind of stuff anyway. So you've got to complete the worksheet. And I think some of this populates if you can.
It does. There's a lot of the cells are actually even locked. So you put in the employee name, their last 4 of their social, and their rate, and then whether or not they had health insurance. A lot of the other stuff will fill out.
Yeah.
And it's pretty well done. I mean, it's kind of complicated, but it does, if you have errors or it recognizes that there's something that doesn't look right, it'll turn the cells red. So you can,
So never be, what I don't want is like whenever we go over this, you can see DHCD is not, design is not one of the things that they're really noted for, or, something of they'll give you an example as a problem, but just always ask the question or figure it out, because 9 times out of 10, if you would qualify for the job creation grant, you might qualify for VGIP, which is the Virginia Job investment program, or you might qualify for some other things. So we always want to try, given your situation, if you're expanding, if you've acquired a company and you get to start from scratch on the employee side of it, any of that, we want to try to walk you through it. Meaning we can only do so much because this is obviously DHCD's program, but we've been working with them for a long time. And so a lot of times we can get you some help, but we also don't want you to miss anything. And so none of these are normally one-offs. There's usually something else, like Ryan's mentioned 2 or 3 other programs, and we mentioned a lot of programs in the beginning. So full-time positions, you don't want to put, if they're not permanent, if they're contract or seasonal, contract employees, that's a big deal nowadays. Lots of people have contract employees, so that's not eligible. They need to be full-time, and the food and beverage, and churn. If they can tell that you're just churning positions in there. Salary wage conversion, don't include bonuses or overtime. Printing worksheets, that's always valuable information. Same thing, April 1st, you're going to go through you're not going to do it through CAMS, which once again I've told you, forget about that. That is a very tedious program at DHCD. It's where a lot of their grant programs and all that are done, but This is, you're gonna go to easy application, you know, take a breath before you hit send, make sure you got all your stuff together. And if it is over 100 employees, you've got to have an attestation from a CPA. And the attestation, I said it right one time. Ryan can tell you that is a laugh a minute, right? I mean, don't they have a whole section here that they're getting ready to go through on the attestation side of it? Right. So we're showing you this as a public service announcement that the CPAs earn their money. How about that?
Form's much shorter.
Yeah. Than the other. So it's really, yeah. So the zone administrator, once again, I have to sign off on these because I am stating that this business is located in an enterprise zone. And, will you go back, Jason? Thank you. All right, so where people call me a lot of times is the zone name. The zone name is, it's either Lynchburg Zone 1 or Lynchburg Zone 2. Then the zone number, which really blows you away, you're either 2 or 46. The designation date is either 1/1/2004, or I think it's 1/1/15 or 16 for zone 46. Then my name goes as the zone administrator, and they're going to ask you here for your federal ID number and your parcel ID number on the real property improvement grant. And if you don't know what that is, that's in GIS under you go in parcel viewer, it'll come up there. But if you need any of that or reminding or anything, just email us and we'll tell you. Because that is, zone name is Lynchburg, and then they want to know what's the state call it. So that wouldn't automatically come to mind. So thanks, Jason.
And the GIS does have a wonderful overlay feature.
Yes. So our GIS, if you get into it, map viewer and parcel viewer, what we've tried to do, and I noticed today that I'll have a conversation with the city assessor to see if I can get some of these things changed on the front page, the property page. It tells you in there, you can click on real estate rehab and all that, but it should say on there, opportunity zone and enterprise zone, right? Because that would keep somebody, but you go down you have to go down the side, and that's a lot. For some people getting in there and they're looking for a property, you go over to the left-hand side and click opportunity zone, enterprise zone, real estate rehab, but I mean, that's a very long list. And if you were interested in a specific property, I would just like for that property card, which is going to be the first thing you come upon if you put the address in there, to just tell you all of the things that it is in, right? And I don't think that's a problem. I just think it's something, they've already got real estate rehab in there. The other thing you can do if you've never done it before is you can go into that property and look at all the building permits and everything that's ever been pulled on it. So if you're getting ready to buy a home or do anything and somebody's told you, you can see historic homes are the worst. Whether you walk in there and they want $500,000 for the place and they tell you they've redone everything and you go in there and they haven't pulled one permit, hello, no. I mean, I've done that when I've been looking before where it's quite pricey, but up under that wall, we're talking about, might as well go ahead and have the fire department live in the backyard because it hasn't been, but it's called Track It. And you can go into there and see all of the building permits and everything that's been pulled on that piece of property. It's very, very, interesting if you're looking at a property to see. And I don't know how far back it goes, but it's useful. So this is just coming down and saying, when was your base year? How many people did you have? Permanent full-time employees. How many did you fill during the grant year? How many extra did you add? Increase over the base year, net new jobs. And then you split them up between 175 and 200%. And those that meet the requirements, and it'll do it will do the math. And this is the same thing. You're going to submit it on April 1st, like I said, and then you'll get a check in July for this. And once again, record keeping, the final year, 1 year following your 5-year period. So this goes on for 5 years, and then once that 5 years is over, when you hit that, if you add on people again, you want to keep that in mind because this rolls, just like it does on the real property improvement grant.
You'll have to reset your base year,
Right,
but that's all.
on the 5th thing, yeah. You're going to have a new base year just like you're going to have a new threshold for the real property improvement grant. It's not cumulative, so.
And now you don't have the option to go back 2 years if you get into that second 5-year period. Your base year is your last grant year, right?
Right, yeah. I don't know that I knew that. Because, normally when we do this, which I'm really excited about because I think on the last few incentives where we've brought the state in, because we try to leverage what does the state got and then what do we have locally, the job creation grant's been meaningful, just like a VGIP has been meaningful, especially if somebody has got a startup, a technology type of startup where they have a pretty good clip that they're paying, folks in there. But we used to get to the job creation part of it, and everybody in there is like over at the snacks. They've gotten up and walked off. They're just going, no, Margette, I'm not dealing with this. So anyway, thank you all for staying here to the bitter end. So we're happy to, you can all have a copy of this electronically. I would say to you that on the real property improvement grant, just get a good CPA. Right? And I've tried this for many a year, is to invite the construction community, to invite the banking community, to invite the insurance community, to invite CPAs. Ryan and Corbin always do me a solid and show up. But I'm trying to get people that you do business with, that you need to run your business to understand this so they can remind people that these things are available. And we try very hard and get high marks from the Department of Housing and Community Development for the fact that every year we pull all the finalized permits. This year, and we've done this before too, Jason pulled all the finalized permits, and he pulled everybody that started a project in 2018 just so we could give them a heads up that this is coming, because how you are keeping your receipts, or even a construction company, if they knew that you were applying for the enterprise zone and they could keep your things organized, that's less money you're going to pay to the CPA firm that has to dig through all that. So always better to know, on the front end and be able to capitalize on that. So we try to tell folks about it as soon as possible so that they can be prepared. But the truth is, you can sit in here, and part of the reason I think in here is good is because it's other people in here, and because we can give you examples of things that have gone on and answer questions. But hopefully, if you go through the experience, you're able to tell people too. So we have just done a 5-year strategic plan, and these are available online. We have actually given away all of these. We're going to reprint them, but we're really excited about the things that we have within this blueprint that we couldn't have done. We had, this plan was done with a steering committee of the business community. So it wasn't, it's a plan of the people that it will serve. And we have an annual report that we do every year, and that's available online too. You can get a hard copy or whatever, but we don't do a lot of events because we're not a chamber of commerce or any of that, meaning We don't want to bring you out. I mean, if you're going to go somewhere, that might be great. We just try to do the enterprise zone once a year, and normally when we release our annual report, we will have a, we'll have a meeting then, just like a celebration and thank you for doing business in the city. So just wanted to bring those to your attention and know that our door is always open. And if you have questions or if you have challenges, no matter what they may be, we're there at the city to be the intersection between local government and the business community, and to be an advocate. We can't ask, the community development department to break the law. My bad. But we certainly can advocate. And so the sooner we know about something, like we get brought in on the back of it, sometimes there's not much we can do, but your input helps us change policies, and your input helps us with devising the types of incentives that as the city grows and changes, that it will need. And your workforce and how that all works is really important to us to know, because everything is changing in terms of business and how it used to be here, from advanced manufacturing and all of that. There's a lot more machines and a lot less people, so there's lots of changes, but sometimes our incentive policies are built on different, they're built on different models, and so we're constantly looking at ways to make sure that we can help you. So thanks so much for being here. Take a cookie, take some cheese, and have a great evening. And I'll also say that if you have a project, if you are doing any kind of development project, whether it's a new construction or a redevelopment project, contact our office and let us do what we call a pre-technical review committee meeting, which means you come in the room, you can have it drawn on the back of a napkin. We bring in the folks, the same folks that you would have to go through the review process with, but it's off the record, and you just walk through the project. It really helps our people in community development be bought into the project, and they will give you the same advice before you put everything in a plan and they go, no, you can't do that, right? Like you can talk through it ahead of time. That's one of the most valuable things there. And then we're there on the ground floor, and if there's some tension or there's something happening there that seems like you ought to be able to get over that wall, we're right there at the very beginning of it. We're not trying to backtrack, and figure it out after the fact. So that is available to anyone that is doing, in our mind, a commercial or industrial or even a mixed-use project that they just want to talk through it. Are there any, water sewer issues? Are there any fire code? I mean, we bring that little core group together to go over the plan, with you. So I just think that is an incredibly valuable way to go about a project, and where you haven't spent all the money on the plans and you have to backtrack on anything. So anyway, thanks.